The blizzard came down from the mountains like a living wall of white fury, and Zachary Jenkins knew with grim certainty that any fool caught out in this storm would be dead before morning. He pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders and urged his horse forward through the deepening snow, squinting against the wind that tore at his face with icy claws. The snow had started falling 3 hours ago, gentle at first, but now it came down so thick he could barely see 5 feet ahead. His bay gelding, Duke, snorted and tossed his head, clearly unhappy about the situation but trusting his rider enough to keep moving. Zachary had been checking the fence lines on the northern pasture when the storm rolled in, and now he was trying to make it back to his ranch before visibility dropped to nothing. It was December of 1883, and New Mexico territory didn't get hit with blizzards like this often, but when they came, they were deadly serious. Most folks down in Glenrio thought the high desert couldn't produce such weather, but up here in the foothills where Zachary's ranch sat, winter could turn mean without warning. He'd seen cattle freeze standing up in weather like this, and he'd heard stories of travelers found in spring, still sitting on their horses, both of them frozen solid as statues. Duke suddenly pulled up short, his ears pricking forward. Zachary felt it too, something different in the howling wind, a sound that didn't quite belong. He listened hard, straining to hear over the storm's roar. There it was again, faint and desperate, a human voice calling for help. "Hello," he shouted into the white chaos. "Where are you?" The answer came back weak and threadbare, somewhere off to his left. Zachary turned Duke in that direction, leaning forward in the saddle as he peered through the driving snow. His heart hammered in his chest because he knew every second counted. In weather like this, exposure could kill in less than an hour. He nearly rode past her. She was huddled against a scrubby juniper tree, her dark coat almost invisible against the trunk, already dusted with snow. When he dismounted and ran to her, he saw she was shaking so badly her teeth chattered like castanets, and her lips had taken on a blue tinge that scared him straight through. "Can you stand?" he asked, putting his hands under her arms. I think so," she managed through chattering teeth. Her voice was refined, educated, completely out of place in this wilderness. "My horse, spooked, threw me." "We need to move now," Zachary said, not wasting time on explanations. "Can you ride?" She nodded, though he could see the effort it cost her just to move. He lifted her easily, surprised at how light she was, and set her up on Duke's back. The gelding shifted but held steady, used to carrying weight. Zachary swung up behind her, wrapping one arm around her waist to hold her secure while he gathered the reins with his other hand. "Hold on to the saddle horn," he told her, feeling her lean back against his chest. She was trembling violently, her body racked with cold. He could feel it through both their coats. "My ranch is about 2 miles south. We can make it if we move fast." He kicked Duke into a trot, the fastest pace he dared in the blinding snow. The woman in his arms made a small sound of pain but held on. Zachary kept his arm tight around her, using his body to shield her from the worst of the wind. Duke pushed forward gamely, head down, following the trail more by instinct than sight. The ride that should have taken 30 minutes stretched into an hour of white hell. Zachary's face went numb, and his fingers grew stiff on the reins. The woman had stopped shaking, which worried him more than the trembling had. That meant her body was giving up the fight to stay warm. He pulled her closer, trying to share what little warmth he had. "Stay with me," he said against her ear. "Don't you dare fall asleep. What's your name?" "Katherine," she mumbled. "Katherine Oliver." "Well, Katherine Oliver, I'm Zachary Jenkins, and you're going to tell me what the hell you were doing out here in this storm. Keep talking." "Was traveling to Glenrio, hired guide. He ran when storm started." Her voice was fading, Katherine. Zachary said sharply. Keep talking, tell me where you're from. Boston, she said, a little stronger. Came west. To teach. Boston to Glenrio is one hell of a journey, he said, keeping his tone conversational even though his own teeth were starting to chatter. What made you want to leave civilization for a dusty little town in New Mexico territory? Wanted. Adventure. She gave a weak laugh. Got more than I bargained for. You surely did. Zachary thought he could make out the dark shape of his barn through the snow. Relief flooded through him. We're almost there. Stay with me just a little longer. Duke picked up his pace, recognizing home. The barn materialized out of the white like a miracle, its solid walls promising shelter. Zachary guided Duke right up to the door, then dismounted and pulled it open. The wind tried to rip it from his hands, but he muscled it wide enough for Duke to step through, then shoved it closed behind them. The sudden absence of wind felt like a blessing. The barn was dark and cold, but it was out of that killing storm. Zachary's hands fumbled on the buttons of his coat, too numb to work properly. He finally got it open and reached up to lift Katherine down from the saddle. She nearly collapsed when her feet hit the ground, and he caught her against his chest. House is just across the yard, he said. Can you walk if I help you? I'll try, she whispered. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders over her own inadequate one, then put his arm around her waist and half carried her to the barn door. The trip across the yard to his house was brutal. The wind hit them like a fist, and the snow was already knee-deep in places. Zachary kept his head down and pushed forward, supporting Katherine's weight as her legs tried to give out. His boots hit the porch steps, and he dragged them both up to the door. Inside, the house was blessedly still and relatively warm. He'd banked the fire before heading out that morning, and coals still glowed in the hearth. Zachary kicked the door shut and guided Katherine to the chair closest to the fireplace. Sit, he ordered, already moving to build up the fire. His hands still weren't working right, clumsy and stiff as he grabbed wood from the box and laid it on the coals. He blew on them gently, coaxing flames to life. The wood caught, and blessed heat began to radiate outward. When he turned back to Katherine, his heart nearly stopped. She'd slumped sideways in the chair, unconscious, her face pale as death. Zachary crossed the room in 2 strides and pressed his fingers to her throat, searching for a pulse. It was there, faint but steady. He needed to get her out of those wet clothes and warmed up fast, or she'd slip from unconsciousness into something worse. He worked quickly, stripping off her wet coat and the dress beneath it, trying hard not to think about the impropriety of it all. Her survival mattered more than propriety. Her undergarments were damp too, but he left those alone and instead grabbed blankets from his bedroom, wrapping her in layer after layer. He carried her to the settee closer to the fire and laid her down, tucking the blankets tight around her. Then he went back out into the storm to take care of Duke. The gelding had earned his keep 10 times over tonight. Zachary rubbed him down, gave him extra grain, and made sure he had water before trudging back to the house. His own clothes were soaked through, and he was shaking hard by the time he got inside. He stripped down to his undershirt and trousers, hanging his wet things near the fire, then checked on Katherine again. Her color looked slightly better, not quite so death pale, though she still hadn't stirred. Zachary put water on to boil for coffee and soup, then settled into the chair to wait and watch, feeding the fire regularly to keep the room warm. Outside, the blizzard howled and raged, but inside, the fire crackled peacefully. Zachary found himself studying the woman on his settee. Even unconscious and pale, she was striking. Dark hair had come loose from its pins and spread across the blanket like silk. Her face had fine bones and a determined chin that suggested strength of character. Her hands, when he'd pulled off her wet gloves, had been soft and uncalloused, confirming her story about coming from back east. What kind of woman traveled alone from Boston to teach in a remote New Mexico town? A brave one, he decided, or perhaps a desperate one. He knew the school board in Glenrio had been trying to hire a teacher for over a year, but the position didn't pay much and the town was rough. Most educated women wanted nothing to do with the frontier. An hour passed, then two. Zachary made coffee and heated up some beef stew, the smell filling the small house. He was sipping his second cup of coffee when Katherine's eyes fluttered open. She stared at the ceiling for a moment, confused, then her gaze found him. "You're safe," he said before she could panic. "You're at my ranch. The storm is still going, but we're warm and dry." She pushed herself up slowly, wincing, and pulled the blankets tighter around herself. Her eyes went wide when she realized she wasn't wearing her dress. "I had to get you out of those wet clothes," Zachary said, keeping his voice matter of fact. "You were half frozen. Your dress is drying by the fire." Katherine's cheeks flushed pink, which he took as a good sign. Color returning meant she was warming up. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You saved my life." "What I did was bring you somewhere out of the storm," he said, standing to pour her a cup of coffee. "Here, drink this. It will help warm you from the inside." She took the cup in both hands, holding it close to her face and breathing in the steam before taking a careful sip. "I thought I was going to die out there," she admitted. "When my horse threw me and ran off, and the storm just kept getting worse. I've never been so frightened in my life." "You're lucky I was checking that north pasture," Zachary said. "Nobody else has any reason to be up in those foothills." "What happened to your guide?" Katherine's expression hardened. When the snow started falling heavily, he took one look at the sky and said he wasn't getting paid enough to die for some Eastern school teacher. He turned his horse around and rode off. "I tried to follow, but my horse got spooked by something, maybe a rabbit or the wind, and threw me. I hit the ground hard, and by the time I got my breath back, the horse was gone and I couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction." Anger flashed through Zachary at the thought of that guide abandoning her. "What was his name?" "Miller. Jack Miller. He came recommended by the stage office in Santa Fe. I know him." Zachary's voice went flat and cold. "And when this storm clears, I'm going to have words with him about leaving a woman to die." "Please don't," Katherine said. "I don't want any violence on my account." "Won't be violence, just words, very pointed words." He ladled stew into a bowl and brought it to her. "You need to eat." "When did you last have food?" "This morning. Some jerky and hardtack." She took the bowl gratefully and ate with an appetite that made him smile. "How long have you been traveling?" he asked, settling back into his chair with his own bowl. 3 weeks since I left Boston." "Train to Kansas City, then stage to Santa Fe, then Miller was supposed to guide me the rest of the way to Glenrio." She paused between bites. "I was supposed to arrive tomorrow to meet with the school board and see the schoolhouse." "That storm is going to last at least another day, maybe 2, Zachary said, glancing at the window where snow pressed against the glass. "And after that, it will take time for the drifts to settle enough for safe travel. You might be my guest for a while." Katherine met his eyes and he saw both worry and trust there. "I don't want to impose. No imposition. Can't send you back out into that." He gestured toward the window. "And I've got plenty of supplies. It gets lonely up here sometimes anyway." "Company will be nice, even if the circumstances aren't ideal." "You run this ranch alone?" she asked. "Mostly. I've got 2 hands who work for me, but they've got a cabin of their own down by the south pasture. They won't try to come up here until the storm clears." He finished his stew and set the bowl aside. "It's just cattle ranching, nothing fancy. I've got about 200 head spread across these foothills. It's a living." How long have you been out here? 5 years. Came out from Missouri after my parents died. Wanted to start fresh somewhere new. He stood and added another log to the fire. What about you? What made you leave Boston for this? Katherine was quiet for a moment, staring into her coffee cup. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. My father wanted me to marry a banker's son. Very respectable, very boring, very much not what I wanted. I'd been teaching at a girls' school, and I saw an advertisement in the paper for teachers needed in the Western Territories. It felt like fate, a chance to do something meaningful and escape a life that felt like a cage. Your father must have been upset, furious. A small smile played at her lips. But I'm 23 years old, not some child to be ordered about. I took my savings, bought my ticket, and left him a letter explaining my decision. I imagine he's still angry, but he'll survive. He has my brother to manage into respectability instead. Zachary found himself respecting her courage. To leave everything familiar and travel alone across half the continent took real strength. The West isn't easy on women, he said carefully. Glenrio is a rough town. Miners, cowboys, gamblers. The schoolhouse is just a one-room building that leaks when it rains. You'll be teaching children who have never seen the inside of a proper school, many of whom don't even speak English as their first language. Good, Katherine said firmly. That means they need a teacher who cares, who won't give up on them. I didn't come west looking for easy, Mr. Jenkins. I came looking for purpose. Call me Zachary, he said. And I believe you'll do just fine, once you learn to watch the weather and not trust guides who value their own skin more than their duty. She laughed at that, a real laugh that lit up her whole face. Lesson learned, I promise. The storm continued to rage outside as evening fell. Zachary gave Katherine his bedroom over her protests and made himself a bedroll by the fire. It wasn't the first time he'd slept on his own floor, and it wouldn't be the last. The important thing was that his unexpected guest was warm and safe. He lay awake for a while, listening to the wind howl and thinking about the woman sleeping in his bed. There was something about Katherine Oliver that intrigued him beyond her pretty face and educated voice. She had fire in her, determination, the kind of strength that could build a life out here if she chose to stay. He found himself hoping she would choose to stay, though he barely knew her. The morning dawned gray and still storming. Snow had drifted against the north side of the house, and when Zachary opened the door to check, it came up past his knees. He waded out to the barn to tend Duke and check his other horses, making sure they had food and water. The chickens in their coop were warm enough, huddled together, and he collected eggs for breakfast. When he came back inside, stamping snow off his boots, he found Katherine awake and wrapped in blankets by the fire. She'd put her dress back on, though it was still a bit damp at the seams. "Good morning," she said, looking almost shy. "I hope you slept all right on the floor." "I've slept in worse places," he assured her, setting the eggs on the table. "How are you feeling? Any lingering cold?" "Much better, thanks to you. A little sore from being thrown, but otherwise well." She stood carefully, testing her balance. "Can I help with breakfast?" "You're a guest," Zachary protested, but she waved him off. "I'm a guest who's imposing on your hospitality. The least I can do is help cook. Besides, I'll go mad if I just sit around doing nothing while the storm rages." They worked together in the small kitchen, falling into an easy rhythm. Katherine proved competent with a skillet, and soon the smell of frying eggs and bacon filled the house. They ate at his rough wooden table, and Zachary found himself talking more than he had in months, telling her about the ranch, about the land, about his hopes to expand his herd and maybe build a bigger house someday. Katherine listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was really thinking about his answers. She told him more about Boston, about the girls she'd taught, about her love of books and learning. They discovered a shared appreciation for poetry, though Zachary admitted he didn't get much chance to read out here. "I brought 3 crates of books with me," Katherine said, her eyes lighting up. "They're in storage in Santa Fe, waiting for me to send for them once I'm settled. Dickens, Austen, Whitman, Shakespeare, everything I couldn't bear to leave behind. You'd be welcome to borrow anything you like." "I'd like that," Zachary said, and meant it. The day passed slowly, the storm showing no signs of letting up. They talked, played cards with a battered deck Zachary found in a drawer, and read from his small collection of books. Katherine had a beautiful reading voice, and she read aloud from a volume of Longfellow while Zachary worked on mending some tack that had been waiting for attention. As evening fell again, Zachary realized he was dreading the storm's end. Once the weather cleared, Katherine would go on to Glenrio, and he'd go back to his solitary life on the ranch. The house would feel emptier than it ever had before. He tried to push the thought away, telling himself he was being foolish. He'd known this woman for barely a day, but it felt like longer. It felt like he'd known her for years. That night, Katherine insisted he take the bed while she took the settee by the fire. They argued about it good-naturedly, until Zachary finally compromised by dragging his mattress out to the main room so they could both sleep near the warmth. It was improper as hell, but they were snowed in together, and propriety seemed less important than practicality. They lay in the firelight, talking softly. Katherine told him about her mother, who had died when she was 12, and how she'd taken over running her father's household even while pursuing her education. Zachary told her about growing up on a farm in Missouri, about learning to rope and ride before he could properly read, about the fever that had taken both his parents within a week of each other. "I'm sorry," Katherine said softly. "That must have been terrible." It was. "But it also set me free in a way. I could have stayed and worked that farm the rest of my life, but instead I sold it and came west to build something of my own. I don't regret it, even though I miss them every day." "I think they'd be proud of what you've built here," Katherine said. "You've made a good life for yourself." "Getting better all the time," Zachary said, and though he didn't say it out loud, he was thinking about her, about the light she'd brought into his lonely house. The storm finally broke on the 3rd day. Zachary woke to silence, the absence of wind so profound it was almost eerie. He got up and looked out the window to see a world transformed into white stillness. The sky was clear and painfully blue, and snow blanketed everything in drifts that rose higher than his head in places. "Is it over?" Katherine asked, coming to stand beside him at the window. "The storm is, but the real work starts now," Zachary said. "I need to check on my cattle, make sure they made it through, and we need to dig out enough to make the road passable." "I can help," Katherine offered. "It's hard work," he warned, but she just gave him a look that said she wasn't afraid of hard work. They spent the day digging out. Katherine proved surprisingly capable with a shovel, working steadily despite the cold and her obvious unfamiliarity with manual labor. They cleared a path to the barn first, then worked on the road. Zachary saddled Duke and rode out to check the herd, relieved to find most of his cattle alive, though he lost 3 head to the storm. By evening, they were both exhausted. Katherine's hands were red and blistered despite the gloves Zachary had given her, and she moved stiffly, obviously sore. But there was satisfaction in her eyes as she surveyed their work. "We make a good team," she said, smiling at him. "That we do," Zachary agreed, and felt something shift in his chest, something warm and terrifying and wonderful all at once. That night, after another shared meal and evening by the fire, Katherine said quietly, "I suppose the road will be passable tomorrow. I should try to reach Glenrio." "Probably," Zachary agreed, though the word felt like glass in his throat. "Though you're welcome to stay longer if you want. No rush." Katherine looked at him across the fire, her expression unreadable. "Zachary, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." His heart kicked up its pace. "All right. These past 3 days have I been imagining things? The way you look at me sometimes, the way we talk so easily, like we've known each other forever instead of days. Or is it just me feeling this way?" Zachary stood and crossed to where she sat, kneeling in front of her so they were at eye level. "It's not just you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Katherine, I know this is crazy, I know we just met. But I feel like I've been waiting for you to walk into my life, and now that you're here, I don't want you to leave." "I don't want to leave either," she whispered. "But I have obligations. The school board is expecting me. I gave my word." "Then go meet with them. Take the teaching position if that's what you want. Glenrio is only 10 miles from here. You could teach and still see me. We could court properly, do this right." He took her hands in his, careful of her blisters. "I know I don't have much to offer. This ranch is small, the work is hard, and the nearest neighbor is 3 miles away. But I'm a good man, Katherine. I'd work every day to make you happy, to give you a life worth living, if you'd consider giving me a chance." Tears shone in Katherine's eyes. "You're offering me everything I came west to find," she said. "Purpose, adventure, and something I didn't even know I was looking for. A man who sees me as I am and values me for it. How could I say no to that?" Zachary pulled her into his arms, and Katherine came willingly, her face pressing against his shoulder. He held her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her heart beat against his chest. It was too fast, too sudden, too impossible. But it was also the most right thing he'd ever felt in his life. When they pulled apart, Katherine was smiling through her tears. "So we're doing this, courting. Even though we barely know each other, we'll learn," Zachary said, brushing a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "We've got time. All the time in the world." The next morning dawned clear and cold. Zachary saddled Duke and his spare horse, a gentle mare named Rosie, and they set out for Glenrio together. The ride took most of the day, the snow making travel slow, but Zachary didn't mind. Every minute with Katherine felt precious. They talked and laughed, and Zachary pointed out landmarks, telling her stories about the land. Katherine asked intelligent questions about ranching, clearly trying to understand his life and work. When they stopped to rest the horses and eat the lunch they'd packed, she asked, "What will people think? About us, I mean. I'm supposed to be the respectable new school teacher and you're a bachelor rancher. Won't there be talk?" "Probably," Zachary admitted. "But talk is just noise. As long as we conduct ourselves properly, meet in public with chaperones when needed, let people see we're serious about each other, the gossip will die down. Frontier towns like Glenrio have seen stranger courtships than ours." "I suppose that's true." Katherine looked thoughtful. "I just don't want to do anything that would cost me the teaching position before I even start. Those children need education." "Then we'll be careful and proper," Zachary promised. "You'll be the best school teacher this territory has ever seen, and I'll be the rancher who's courting you respectfully. We'll make it work." They reached Glenrio as the sun was setting, painting the rough buildings in shades of gold and amber. The town wasn't much to look at. A main street of false-fronted buildings, a few side streets and houses scattered on the outskirts. But it had a church, a general store, a saloon, and most importantly, a small schoolhouse at the edge of town. Zachary guided them to the boarding house run by Mrs. Henderson, a widow who rented rooms to travelers and newcomers. The plump, gray-haired woman took one look at Katherine's bedraggled appearance and immediately went into mother hen mode, clucking over her and demanding to know what had happened. Katherine explained about the storm and her rescue while Zachary arranged for her room. Mrs. Henderson's sharp eyes went back and forth between them, clearly noting the way they stood close together, the way Zachary's hand hovered protectively near Katherine's elbow. "Well," she said finally, "you're lucky Mr. Jenkins found you. That storm killed 2 prospectors up in the hills. Could have been 3 dead if not for him." She turned to Zachary. "You staying in town tonight?" "No, madam. Need to get back to my ranch. But I'll be back in a few days to check on Miss Oliver, if that's all right with her." "More than all right," Katherine said, smiling at him. Zachary took his leave reluctantly, tipping his hat to both women and mounting Duke. As he rode out of town, he looked back once to see Katherine standing on the boarding house porch, watching him go. She raised her hand in a wave, and he returned it, already counting the days until he could see her again. The week that followed was the longest of Zachary's life. He threw himself into ranch work, repairing storm damage and checking his herd, but his mind was always partly in Glenrio, wondering how Katherine was doing. Had her meeting with the school board gone well? Was she settling into the boarding house? Did she think of him as often as he thought of her? On the 5th day, he couldn't stand it anymore. He cleaned up, put on his good shirt, and rode into town. It was a Saturday, and the main street was busy with people doing their weekly shopping. Zachary stopped at the general store first, buying supplies he didn't really need, trying to work up the courage to go to the boarding house. "Zachary Jenkins, is that you?" a voice called. He turned to see Reverend Thomas, the circuit preacher who served Glenrio and several other small towns in the area. "Haven't seen you in a while, son." "Been busy with the ranch, Reverend," Zachary said, shaking the older man's hand. "Storm did some damage I've been fixing." "Heard you pulled our new schoolteacher out of that storm. Saved her life by all accounts." The Reverend's eyes twinkled. "She's quite something, isn't she? Smart as a whip and not afraid to speak her mind. Had dinner with her and the school board last week. She's going to do great things with those children." "I'm sure she will," Zachary said, feeling his chest swell with pride even though Katherine's accomplishments had nothing to do with him. "Is she at the boarding house?" "Actually, I just saw her at the schoolhouse. She's been there every day this week, cleaning and organizing. Classes start Monday." The Reverend clapped him on the shoulder. "You should go say hello. I'm sure she'd be glad to see you." Zachary needed no further encouragement. He tied Duke outside the schoolhouse and walked up the steps, his boots sounding loud on the wooden porch. Through the window, he could see Katherine standing on a chair, hanging a map on the wall. His heart did something complicated in his chest at the sight of her. He knocked softly and Katherine turned, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Zachary!" She climbed down from the chair and hurried to open the door, pulling him inside. "I was hoping you'd come. Couldn't stay away any longer," he admitted. "How are you?" "How did everything go with the school board?" "Wonderful. They're so relieved to have a teacher. They practically gave me free rein to run the school as I see fit. And look at this space." She gestured around the one-room schoolhouse with obvious delight. "It needs work, but it has good bones. I've been cleaning and organizing, and I've already got 16 students enrolled for Monday." The room was indeed transformed from the dusty, neglected space it had been. The floor was swept clean, the windows washed, desks arranged in neat rows. Books were stacked on a shelf, and Katherine had hung cheerful curtains that softened the bare walls. "You've been busy," Zachary said, impressed. "I couldn't help myself. I'm so excited to start teaching I can barely sleep." Katherine's enthusiasm was infectious, and Zachary found himself grinning. "But that's not the only reason I couldn't sleep." "No." He took a step closer to her. "No, I kept thinking about a certain rancher who rescued me from a blizzard and then stole my heart." She looked up at him, her eyes warm. "I missed you, Zachary. I missed you too. Every day this week I had to stop myself from riding into town just to see you." He took her hand, noting that her blisters were healing. "This isn't too fast for you, I mean. We can slow down if you need to." "I don't want to slow down," Katherine said firmly. "Life is too short and too uncertain. I nearly died in that storm, and if I had, I would have died never having experienced real feeling, real connection. I don't want to waste the time we have by being cautious." Zachary cupped her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs brushing her soft cheeks. "Katherine Oliver, you are the bravest woman I've ever met. Kiss me," she whispered. "Please." He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she rose on her toes to meet him halfway. Their lips met softly at first, tentative, learning. Then Katherine made a small sound in the back of her throat and pressed closer, and Zachary's arms came around her, pulling her tight against him as the kiss deepened. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "That was worth waiting for," he said, making her laugh. "We should be careful," Katherine said, though she didn't step out of his embrace. "If someone saw us kissing, it would cause talk." "Then I'll have to make sure I only kiss you where no one can see," Zachary said, stealing another quick kiss that made her smile. "When can I see you again?" "Tomorrow's Sunday. Will you sit with me at church?" "I'd love to." Katherine finally stepped back, though she kept hold of his hands. "And maybe after church, you could show me more of the area. I'd like to learn the land, understand where I am. I'd be honored." They spent another hour together, Zachary helping Katherine finish hanging her maps and decorations while she told him about each of her students, what she knew of them so far. He loved watching her talk about teaching, the way her whole face came alive with passion and purpose. When he finally rode home that evening, he felt like a different man than the one who'd found a half-frozen woman in a blizzard less than 2 weeks ago. Katherine had changed something fundamental in him, had opened up places in his heart he'd thought were closed forever. He was falling in love with her, hard and fast and completely, and the terrifying thing was that he didn't want to stop. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern. Katherine threw herself into teaching, and by all accounts, she was wonderful at it. The children adored her, and even the tough frontier parents who'd been skeptical about an Eastern schoolteacher had to admit she was doing a fine job. She didn't just teach reading and arithmetic. She made her students think, question, explore. She organized spelling bees and started a lending library with her own books, creating a hunger for learning in a town that had always been too focused on survival to think much about education. Zachary came to town twice a week, on Wednesday afternoons and Sundays. They attended church together, and he courted her properly under the watchful eyes of Mrs. Henderson and half the town. They took walks, always with a chaperone. They had dinner at the boarding house or occasionally at the home of one of the school board members. They talked endlessly, learning each other's hopes and dreams, fears and failures, and they fell deeper in love with every passing day. In March, Zachary invited Katherine to spend a Saturday at his ranch. Mrs. Henderson came along as chaperone, riding in a borrowed wagon while Zachary and Katherine rode horseback. Katherine had been taking riding lessons, determined to be comfortable on a horse after her traumatic experience, and she handled Rosie with growing confidence. The day was perfect. Zachary showed Katherine his operation, explaining how he managed the herd, rotated pastures, planned for the future. She asked intelligent questions and made suggestions that showed she'd been thinking about his business. They had a picnic lunch on a hill overlooking the ranch, and Mrs. Henderson conveniently fell asleep in the wagon, giving them a few precious moments of privacy. I love it here, Katherine said, gazing out over the rolling hills. I can see why you chose this place. It's beautiful land, Zachary agreed, but it's lonely sometimes. I always thought I'd build a life here alone, but now that I've met you, I can't imagine it without you. This place needs laughter and life. It needs you. Katherine turned to look at him, her expression serious. Are you asking me something, Zachary Jenkins? Not yet, he said, taking her hand. We've only known each other 3 months. I want to give you time to be sure to know that this life is what you want. But I'm asking you to think about it, about a future here with me. I don't need more time to know what I want, Katherine said softly. I knew that first night in your house, when you gave me your bed and slept on the floor, when you trusted me enough to tell me about your parents. I knew when you rode with me to Glenrio and arranged everything to protect my reputation. I knew every time you looked at me like I'm the most important thing in your world. I want this future, Zachary. I want it with my whole heart. Zachary felt like he might burst with happiness. Then let me do this right. Let me talk to Reverend Thomas, arrange things properly. Will you marry me, Katherine? Will you be my wife and my partner? Will you share this ranch and this life with me? Yes, Katherine said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, absolutely yes. He kissed her there on the hillside with Mrs. Henderson snoring in the wagon and his whole future stretching out bright and possible before him. When they told the chaperone the news, she cried happy tears and hugged them both, declaring she'd known from the start they were meant for each other. The wedding was planned for June, giving Katherine time to finish the school year and giving them time to prepare. Zachary threw himself into improving the ranch house, adding a second bedroom and a proper kitchen, fixing everything he'd let slide during his bachelor years. Katherine spent her free time sewing, reading books about ranching and cattle management, preparing herself for her new life. The town of Glenrio embraced the romance, everyone wanting to be part of the love story. Mrs. Henderson organized a quilting bee to make them a wedding quilt. The women of the church hosted a bridal shower. Even some of Zachary's rancher friends, tough men who didn't talk much about feelings, told him he was lucky to have found a woman like Katherine. The only shadow came when Katherine received a letter from Boston. Her father wrote demanding she return home immediately and abandon this foolish frontier marriage. He'd already arranged for her to marry the banker's son, he said, and she would obey him or be disowned. Katherine read the letter once, then calmly folded it and tossed it into the fire. I choose you, she told Zachary when he asked if she was all right. I choose this life. He'll forgive me eventually or he won't, but either way, I'm not going back. Your father is a fool to lose you, Zachary said, holding her close. His loss is my gain. June arrived in a blaze of heat and sunshine. The morning of the wedding, Zachary woke early in his house, knowing it would be the last morning he'd wake up alone. Tonight, Katherine would be here, would be his wife, would share his bed and his life forever. The thought made him nervous and excited and grateful all at once. The ceremony was held at the church, simple and beautiful. Katherine wore a cream-colored dress she'd made herself, with wildflowers in her hair that Zachary's neighbor's daughter had picked that morning. Zachary wore his best suit, his boots polished to a shine. When Katherine walked down the aisle toward him, smiling like sunrise, he felt his throat close up with emotion. They spoke their vows in front of God and the whole town, promising to love and honor and cherish until death parted them. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them man and wife and told Zachary he could kiss his bride, Zachary gathered Katherine in his arms and kissed her thoroughly, not caring that everyone was watching. She was his now, his wife, his future, and he wanted the whole world to know it. The reception was held in the church hall, with food contributed by everyone in town. There was music and dancing and more well wishes than Zachary could count. His two ranch hands clapped him on the back and told Katherine she was getting a good man, even if he was a demanding boss. Katherine's students, led by her oldest pupil, presented them with a handmade book of drawings and letters expressing what she'd meant to them. As evening fell, Zachary and Katherine slipped away from the party and rode back to the ranch, their ranch now together. The house looked different somehow, transformed by Katherine's touches over the past weeks. Curtains in the windows, flowers in a vase, her books on the shelves. It looked like a home instead of just a place to sleep. That night, Zachary carried Katherine over the threshold and into their bedroom. He was nervous, worried about hurting her or doing something wrong, but Katherine's gentle hands on his face and her whispered encouragements guided them both. They came together with tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies as they'd learned each other's hearts, and when they finally lay tangled together afterward, Zachary felt a completeness he'd never known was possible. "I love you," he murmured against her hair. "I'll love you until I die and beyond." "I love you too," Katherine said, pressing a kiss to his chest. "Thank you for finding me in that blizzard. Thank you for sharing your horse and your home and your future with me." "Thank you for being brave enough to come west," Zachary replied. "Thank you for choosing this life and choosing me." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the windows open to let in the cool night air and the sound of crickets, the stars bright overhead. Life settled into a new rhythm after the wedding. Katherine continued teaching, riding into Glenrio 3 days a week while Zachary ran the ranch. On the days she taught, he made sure to finish his work early so he could ride in and escort her home, not wanting her to travel alone even though the weather was good. On the days she stayed home, she helped with the ranch work, proving surprisingly capable at everything from mending fences to helping with difficult births during calving season. They worked hard, but they also made time for joy. Saturday nights became their night to be together without work intruding, to cook a good meal and talk and make love without the worry of early mornings. Sunday mornings they went to church, and Sunday afternoons they explored the land together, Katherine on Rosie and Zachary on Duke, finding hidden valleys and clear streams, marking out places they wanted to show their children someday. By fall, Katherine realized she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat belly. "There's a baby," she said simply. "Our baby." Zachary's eyes filled with tears. He pulled Katherine into his lap and held her close, overcome with emotion. "When?" he managed to ask. "March, I think, maybe early April." Katherine was smiling through her own tears. "I know it's fast, we've only been married a few months, but I'm so happy, Zachary. I want this baby so much." "Fast is fine," Zachary said, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Perfect even. A baby by spring. God, Katherine, you've made me the happiest man alive." Katherine taught through the fall and into December before the school board insisted she take leave for her health. She protested, wanting to finish the school year, but Zachary sided with the board. "I won't risk you or the baby," he said firmly. "You can teach again after the baby comes if you want, but right now, you need to rest." She grumbled but complied, spending the winter months preparing the second bedroom as a nursery and knitting tiny clothes. Zachary became almost comically protective, not wanting her to lift anything heavy or work too hard. Katherine found it sweet and exasperating in equal measure, but she loved him for caring so much. The baby came on a stormy night in late March, almost exactly a year after Zachary and Katherine had married. Mrs. Henderson came to help, along with the doctor from Glenrio, and Zachary paced the main room as his wife labored in their bedroom. Every cry of pain from Katherine tore at his heart, and he wanted to break down the door and demand they let him in. But Mrs. Henderson had barred him entry, saying men had no business at a birthing. After what felt like an eternity, he heard a different sound, the thin, angry wail of a newborn. Zachary's heart leaped into his throat. A moment later, Mrs. Henderson opened the door, smiling broadly. "You have a son," she announced. "A healthy boy, and your wife is fine. Tired, but fine. You can come in now." Zachary stumbled into the bedroom to find Katherine propped up on pillows, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. His son. His and Katherine's son. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, staring in wonder at the small red face, the tiny fingers curled into fists. "He's perfect," Zachary breathed. "You're perfect. God, Katherine, I can't believe he's ours." "Do you want to hold him?" Katherine asked, and Zachary nodded, not trusting his voice. She placed the baby in his arms, and Zachary cradled his son carefully, terrified of dropping him or hurting him. The baby's eyes opened, unfocused, but somehow seeming to look right at him, and Zachary fell in love all over again. They named him Thomas, after the reverend who'd married them, with Zachary's father's name, Robert, as a middle name. Thomas Robert Jenkins. The baby was healthy and strong, with his mother's dark hair and what promised to be his father's build. He had a good set of lungs and used them frequently, especially at night, but Zachary didn't mind. Every cry meant his son was alive and well. Katherine proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving even when exhausted. Zachary helped as much as he could, changing diapers and walking the floor with Thomas when he fussed, doing anything to ease Katherine's burden. They were a team in parenting as they were in everything else, supporting each other through the challenges of new parenthood. As Thomas grew, the ranch prospered. Zachary's herd increased, and he was able to hire 2 more hands to help manage the growing operation. Katherine returned to teaching part-time when Thomas was 6 months old, bringing the baby with her to school. The students loved having a baby in the classroom, and it taught them responsibility as they took turns helping watch him. 2 years after Thomas was born, Katherine gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Clara after Katherine's mother. Clara had her father's green eyes and her mother's delicate features, and from the moment she was born, she had Zachary wrapped around her tiny finger. Thomas, now a curious toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything, though his help often created more work than it saved. Life was full and busy and sometimes chaotic, but it was also rich with love and meaning. Zachary often found himself thinking back to that December day when he'd found Katherine lost in the blizzard. If he'd been 5 minutes later checking that north pasture, if the storm had hidden her more completely, if any one of a dozen small things had been different, they never would have met. He would have continued his lonely existence on the ranch, never knowing what he was missing. But fate, or providence, or simple luck had brought them together, and Zachary never took a single day of it for granted. Every morning he woke up next to Katherine. Every evening they spent together with their children. Every moment of laughter and struggle and ordinary life was a gift he'd never expected to receive. On a warm evening in late spring, when Thomas was 4 and Clara was 2, the family sat on the porch together watching the sunset. Thomas was chattering about something he'd seen in town that day, and Clara was dozing against Zachary's chest, thumb in her mouth. Katherine sat beside them, her hand in Zachary's, her head resting on his shoulder. "You ever regret it?" Zachary asked quietly. "Leaving Boston, coming west, marrying a rancher instead of that banker's son?" Katherine turned her head to look at him, her eyes soft with love. "Not for one single second," she said. "This life, this place, you and our children, it's everything I dreamed of and more. I found my purpose here, Zachary. I found my home. I found you." "I found you too," Zachary said, kissing her temple. "Best thing I ever did, finding you in that blizzard." "You saved my life that day," Katherine said. "No," Zachary corrected gently. "We saved each other. I was just surviving before you came along. You taught me how to really live." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Thomas eventually quieted, leaning against his mother, and Clara slept peacefully. The ranch spread out around them, the land they'd built together, the life they were creating one day at a time. In that moment, Zachary felt a profound sense of contentment. His herd was strong, his ranch was thriving, but more importantly, his family was healthy and happy. He had a wife who was his partner in every sense of the word, who challenged him and supported him and loved him with her whole heart. He had 2 beautiful children who filled his days with wonder. He had everything he'd never known he needed. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and growth. The children grew taller and stronger. Thomas became his father's shadow, following Zachary around the ranch and learning everything about cattle and horses and land management. He was a serious, thoughtful boy with a natural gift for working with animals. Clara, on the other hand, inherited her mother's love of learning. She was always asking questions, always reading, always wanting to understand how things worked. When Thomas was 7 and Clara was 5, Katherine gave birth to their 3rd child, another son they named Henry. Henry came into the world screaming his displeasure at having been disturbed, and he maintained that fierce spirit as he grew. He was fearless where Thomas was cautious, impulsive where Clara was thoughtful. He kept his parents on their toes and filled the house with laughter and occasional chaos. The ranch continued to prosper. Zachary expanded his operation, buying adjacent land when it became available and increasing his herd to over 500 head. He earned a reputation as a fair man who treated his workers well and produced quality cattle. Buyers came from as far as Santa Fe to purchase from him. The small ranch he'd started with had become one of the most successful operations in the territory. Katherine's school also thrived. She'd taught dozens of children over the years, many of whom had gone on to further education or successful careers. She'd built a lending library that served the whole town and organized annual spelling bees and recitation contests that became community events. She was respected and loved, known for her dedication to her students and her refusal to give up on even the most challenging children. But despite their success and full lives, Zachary and Katherine always made time for each other. They still took Saturday evenings for themselves, still explored the land together when they could steal away. Their love hadn't faded with time and children and responsibility. If anything, it had deepened, becoming richer and more complex as they faced life's challenges together. When Zachary was 38 and Katherine was 36, they received an unexpected letter. It was from Katherine's brother, whom she hadn't heard from in years. He wrote to tell her that their father had passed away. The old man had been ill for some time, her brother explained, and in his final days, he'd expressed regret about the estrangement from his daughter. He'd left Katherine a portion of his estate and a letter asking for her forgiveness. Katherine read the news with mixed emotions. She'd long since made peace with her father's anger and her choice to leave, but there was still grief in learning he was gone. Zachary held her while she cried, not trying to fix her pain but simply being there with her through it. "Do you want to go to Boston?" he asked. "Pay your respects, see your brother." Katherine considered it, then shook her head. "My life is here now. My father made his choice when he tried to control my life, and I made mine when I came west. I'm sorry he's gone, and I'm sorry we never reconciled, but I can't regret the path I took. It led me to you and to our children and to this life. That's worth more than any inheritance or any father's approval." She wrote a letter to her brother, thanking him for letting her know and telling him about her life in New Mexico. She described Zachary and the children, the ranch and the school, the community they'd built. She sent a photograph of the whole family, all 5 of them standing in front of the ranch house. She wanted her brother to see that she was happy, that her choice had been the right one. The years continued their steady march forward. The children grew into young adults. Thomas, at 18, was tall and broad-shouldered like his father, with a quiet confidence and a natural way with cattle. He'd made it clear he intended to stay on the ranch and eventually take over the operation. Zachary had never been prouder. Clara, at 16, was beautiful and brilliant, with her mother's love of teaching and her father's determination. She wanted to go to college, something almost unheard of for a woman in the territory, but Katherine and Zachary were determined to make it happen. They'd been saving money for years, and if Clara wanted an education, she would have it. Henry, at 11, was still finding his way. He loved the ranch but also dreamed of adventure beyond its borders. He talked about becoming a lawman or a scout, something that would let him roam and explore. Zachary understood the impulse, remembered his own young restlessness, and he trusted that Henry would find his path in time. On a cool evening in October, Zachary and Katherine celebrated their 21st wedding anniversary. The children had prepared a surprise dinner, complete with a cake that Clara had baked, and Thomas had decorated with somewhat crooked frosting letters spelling out "Happy Anniversary." Henry had picked wildflowers, which Clara had arranged in a vase on the table. After dinner, while the children cleaned up, Zachary and Katherine slipped out to the porch, their favorite spot for quiet conversation. Zachary pulled Katherine close, wrapping a blanket around both of them against the chill. 21 years, Katherine said wonderingly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you found me in that blizzard. Other times it feels like we've been together forever. Best 21 years of my life, Zachary said. You know what amazes me most? I still get excited every time I see you. My heart still speeds up when you smile at me. After all these years, all these children, all the ordinary moments of life together, I'm still completely in love with you. That's because we chose each other every day, Katherine said. We didn't just fall in love once and coast on that. We kept choosing each other, kept working to stay connected, kept making our relationship a priority even when life got hard or busy or overwhelming. That's the real secret, I think. You're a wise woman, Mrs. Jenkins, Zachary said, kissing the top of her head. I learned from the best, Mr. Jenkins. They sat in companionable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the sound of their children's voices, arguing good-naturedly about something, and both parents smiled. This was their life, the one they'd built together from a chance meeting in a blizzard. It wasn't always easy or perfect, but it was real and rich and full of love. You remember what you said to me that first night? Katherine asked. When I asked if you felt what I was feeling. I said I felt like I'd been waiting for you to walk into my life, Zachary replied, and that I didn't want you to leave. You also said we had all the time in the world, Katherine reminded him, and you were right. Look at everything we've built with that time. 3 beautiful children, a thriving ranch, a community we're part of, a love that's only grown stronger. We took that time and we made something beautiful with it. We're not done yet, Zachary pointed out. We've still got plenty of years ahead of us, God willing. Grandchildren to spoil, more adventures to have, more memories to make. I'm looking forward to all of it, Katherine said. Every moment as long as I have you beside me. Always, Zachary promised. Until the day I die and beyond. You're stuck with me, Katherine Jenkins. Best thing that ever happened to me, getting stuck with you, Katherine said, tilting her face up for a kiss. Their lips met, gentle and familiar. A kiss shared between people who knew each other completely and loved what they knew. When they parted, both were smiling. Inside the house, Clara called out that the dishes were done and asking if they wanted coffee. Zachary and Katherine went back inside together, hand in hand, to join their children for the rest of the evening. They played cards and told stories, the family together, comfortable and happy in each other's company. Late that night, after the children had gone to bed, Zachary and Katherine lay together in the darkness of their bedroom. Katherine's head rested on Zachary's chest and his arms were wrapped around her, holding her close. "Thank you," Katherine whispered into the dark. "For what?" Zachary asked. "For seeing me that day. For not riding past. For sharing your horse and your home and your whole life with me. For giving me a future I never could have imagined, but which turned out to be exactly what I needed." "I could say the same to you," Zachary replied. "You took a chance on a lonely rancher and turned his house into a home. You gave me children and love and purpose. You made my life mean something beyond just surviving day to day. If anyone should be saying thank you, it's me." "Then we're both grateful," Katherine said. "Both lucky, both blessed." "That we are," Zachary agreed, pulling her closer. "That we surely are." They drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other's arms, the same way they'd slept thousands of nights before and would sleep thousands of nights to come. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the moon. The ranch was quiet and peaceful, a place of safety and love and family. The years rolled on, bringing changes and challenges but also joy and growth. Thomas married at 22, bringing home a sweet-faced young woman named Sarah from a neighboring ranch. They built a house on the far side of the property and started their own family, giving Zachary and Katherine their first grandchildren, twin boys who were holy terrors and the delight of everyone's lives. Clara went east to college, something that terrified Katherine but which she supported wholeheartedly. Clara wrote home every week, filling her letters with details about her studies and her professors and the exciting new ideas she was learning. She graduated with honors and came home to teach, taking over from Katherine, who was ready to retire and spend more time with her growing brood of grandchildren. Henry found his path in his late teens, becoming a territorial ranger charged with keeping the peace across the vast stretches of New Mexico. It was dangerous work, and Katherine worried about him constantly, but he was good at it and happy. He came home whenever he could, always with new stories that made his father laugh and his mother scold him for taking unnecessary risks. As Zachary and Katherine moved into their 50s, they gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch and school, trusting the younger generation to carry on what they'd built. Thomas ran the ranch now, with his father as advisor, and he was doing an excellent job. Clara had taken the school to new heights, expanding it and bringing in additional teachers to handle the growing number of students. Henry sent money home when he could and always made sure his mother knew he was safe. Zachary and Katherine finally had time for themselves again, the way they'd had in those early days of their marriage. They took long rides together, exploring corners of the ranch they hadn't visited in years. They read to each other in the evenings, working their way through Katherine's extensive library. They traveled a bit, visiting Santa Fe and Albuquerque, seeing the territory they'd called home for so long from new perspectives. And they loved each other with the depth and richness that came from a lifetime spent together. Their passion had mellowed somewhat with age, but it was still there, still strong. More importantly, they had a profound friendship, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared history. They could communicate with a glance, finish each other's sentences, support each other without words. They were two people who'd become one unit while still maintaining their individual identities. On a summer evening when Zachary was 56 and Katherine was 54, they sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they'd done thousands of times before. Their hands were clasped together, fingers intertwined, and they watched their grandchildren playing in the yard. There were 5 of them now, ranging in age from 8 to 2, and they filled the ranch with noise and laughter. "Can you believe this is our life?" Katherine asked, her voice full of wonder. "Sometimes I still feel like that frightened woman lost in a blizzard, and then I look around and see all of this, everything we've built, and I can hardly believe it's real." "It's real," Zachary assured her, squeezing her hand. "Every beautiful, chaotic, wonderful moment of it. We made this life, Katherine, together, and I wouldn't change a single thing about it. Not even the time Henry broke his arm trying to ride that wild horse," Katherine asked, a teasing note in her voice. "Well, maybe I'd change that," Zachary conceded with a laugh. "And possibly the time Clara decided to reorganize my entire barn, and I couldn't find anything for a week. And definitely the time Thomas accidentally let all the chickens out and we spent 3 days trying to round them up. But those moments are part of the story," Katherine said. "The imperfect, messy, real moments that make up a life. I love even those parts because they are ours." "I love them too," Zachary agreed. "I love all of it, all of you, all of this life we've made. You're still the best thing that ever happened to me, Katherine Jenkins. Finding you in that blizzard was the moment everything changed for the better." "You saved my life that day," Katherine said, "not for the first time over the years." "And you saved mine," Zachary replied, as he always did. "Maybe not from freezing, but from loneliness, from a half-lived life. You made me whole, Katherine. You made everything worthwhile." As the sun sank lower, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, their eldest grandchild, Thomas's son Jacob, ran up to the porch. "Grandpa, Grandma, come see what we built," he demanded with all the imperious authority of an 8-year-old. Zachary and Katherine exchanged amused glances and let themselves be pulled off the porch to admire an elaborate construction of sticks and rocks that the children had declared to be a fort. They praised the engineering and asked serious questions about the design, treating the children's creation with the respect it deserved. Later, after the grandchildren had been collected by their parents and taken home for dinner and bed, after the ranch had settled into evening quiet, Zachary and Katherine prepared for bed themselves. They moved through their nighttime routine with the ease of long practice, each knowing where the other would be and what they would do. As they lay in bed, Katherine curled against Zachary's side, her head on his shoulder. She said quietly, "I want you to promise me something." "Anything," Zachary replied, his hand stroking her hair. "If I go first, I don't want you to stop living. I want you to remember the joy we had together and let that carry you forward. Don't shut yourself away or give up. Promise me you'll keep going, keep loving our family, keep being the wonderful man you've always been." Zachary's chest tightened at the thought of losing her, but he knew this conversation was important. They weren't young anymore, and pretending they'd live forever would be foolish. "I promise," he said, his voice rough. "But you have to promise me the same thing. If I go first, you keep teaching and loving and living. You've got too much to offer the world to let my passing stop you." "I promise," Katherine whispered. "Though I hope it's many, many years before either of us has to make good on these promises." "Agreed," Zachary said, holding her tighter. I plan to be stubborn and stick around for a long time yet. We've got more grandbabies to spoil and more sunsets to watch together." "That sounds perfect," Katherine said, pressing a kiss to his chest. "I love you, Zachary Jenkins, today, tomorrow, and always." "I love you too, Katherine Jenkins, more than words can say." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, hearts beating in tandem, two lives that had become inextricably intertwined. And in the morning, they would wake up together and face another day, another adventure, another chance to live the life they'd chosen and built together. The seasons continued their endless cycle, and Zachary and Katherine moved through them with grace and gratitude. They celebrated births and mourned deaths, supported their children through challenges, and delighted in their grandchildren's milestones. The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's management, and Clara's school educated a new generation of children who would shape the territory's future. Henry eventually settled down, marrying a fellow ranger and building a home in a town 2 days' ride away. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house and spilled out onto the porch and into the yard. There was food and music and laughter, and Zachary and Katherine stood in the middle of it all, overwhelmed by the love surrounding them. Thomas stood to make a toast, raising his glass high. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "Two people who showed all of us what real love looks like. Not the easy, romantic kind you read about in stories, but the everyday kind that chooses to stay and work and build something lasting. You taught us that love is a verb, something you do every day, not just something you feel. Thank you for that lesson and for this family and for this life you've given us. Happy anniversary." "Happy anniversary." Everyone chorused, glasses raised, children shouting with their parents. Zachary pulled Katherine close and kissed her right there in front of everyone, not caring that their children groaned good-naturedly, or that some of the grandchildren made gagging sounds. When they parted, both were laughing, eyes bright with happy tears. 30 years, Katherine said, shaking her head in amazement. "How did we get so lucky?" "We didn't get lucky," Zachary corrected gently. "We worked hard and chose each other every day and built this life brick by brick. That's not luck, my love. That's determination and love and partnership." "Then I'm determined to have 30 more years," Katherine declared. "At least." "Deal," Zachary said, sealing it with another kiss. The party continued late into the night, and when everyone had finally gone home, or settled into guest rooms and makeshift beds throughout the house, Zachary and Katherine stood alone on their porch one more time. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, the same stars that had shone down on them that night so long ago when a blizzard had brought them together. "You ever think about how different everything could have been?" Katherine asked. "If the storm had come a day earlier or later, if you'd checked a different pasture, if I'd chosen a different guide or a different town." "Sometimes," Zachary admitted. "And it terrifies me. The thought that we might never have met, that I might have lived my whole life without knowing you existed. But we did meet, and we did fall in love, and we did build this life together. That's what matters, not what could have been, but what is." "What is?" Katherine repeated, leaning into him. "What is beautiful, Zachary? What is more than I ever dreamed possible? What is everything I needed and wanted and hoped for, all wrapped up in you and our family and this place?" "The blizzard brought us together," Zachary said, "but it's been 30 years of daily choice that kept us together. 30 years of loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life, Katherine, and I'm not done yet. Not by a long shot." "Good," Katherine said, smiling up at him in the starlight, "because I'm not done with you either." They stood there together, wrapped in blankets and each other, watching the night sky and listening to the sounds of their sleeping family inside the house. The ranch spread out around them in the darkness, familiar and beloved, a testament to everything they'd built together. And in that moment, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and love well shared, both Zachary and Katherine felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. The cowboy had found her lost in a blizzard all those years ago. He'd shared his horse to get her to safety, shared his home to warm her, shared his heart to love her. And in return, she'd shared everything she was and everything she had, building a future with him that neither could have imagined alone. They'd taken a moment of crisis and turned it into a lifetime of love. They transformed a chance meeting into a family, a ranch, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. As they finally went inside for the night, Zachary took one last look at the sky. Somewhere up there, his parents were watching, he believed, and Katherine's mother too. And he thought they would be pleased with what their children had made of their lives, with the love they'd found and nurtured and shared. The door closed behind them, shutting out the night and closing them in with warmth and family and home. And in the morning, they would wake up together as they had for 30 years, ready to face whatever the new day brought, side by side, hand in hand, hearts forever intertwined. This was their story. A cowboy and a schoolteacher, a blizzard and a rescue, a shared horse and a shared future. It was a story of survival and love, of choice and commitment, of building something lasting in an uncertain world. And it was a story that would live on through their children and grandchildren, a reminder that sometimes the worst storms bring the greatest blessings, and sometimes getting lost is the only way to truly find your way home.